afternoon, and thank you for joining our teaching for the 21st Century webinar brought to you by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the Glazov Gang. I'm your host, Danny Cyrus. Please use the Q&A box on your screen if you're joining us via Zoom. If you are with us on Facebook, feel free to use the comments section if you have any questions. And I promise we will get to answer those as soon as our very special guest presentation is over. Before I introduce our speaker this evening, I just wanted to ask you to please go ahead and follow our Facebook page. On Facebook, you can look up Front Page Mag or the David Horowitz Freedom Center, either one. And also remember, these webinars are brought to you by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the Glazov Gang for free. So we can always appreciate 100% tax deductible that you can make by going to frontpagemag.com. With that being said, it is my absolute privilege to introduce our guest this evening, Jim Henson. He is the Executive Director of America Matters, and he previously served in U.S. Army Special Forces. He's also the author of the book, Winning the Second Civil War. Hello, Jim.
Hey, good to be with you, Annie.
It is great to have you on, and thank you so much for your service, sir.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I know you have a lot of important information for us tonight, so floor is yours.
And I will try not to abuse that privilege, which I appreciate. I have a tolerance myself for listening to other people flap their gums incessantly that ends a little earlier than some. I appreciate everyone coming in and joining this. I think we have a topic that actually caused me to change careers. It is that important to the security and safety and future of our republic. I believe right now we are in a second civil war with the woke left. And I believe the woke left is just another rebrand of the death cult of socialism. And I think the most horrifying thing about that right now is we're losing. And that's the reason I decided that I was going to take my entire adult life has been spent in the service of the United States and our strategic interests in defense, national security, and foreign policy. And in the past couple of years, my wife and I made a decision that the real enemies still exist outside this country, but inside this country, the true danger is that we could lose the republic to people who are trying to fundamentally transform this country from the liberty-loving republic that the founders built into something that Stalin and Mao and all the other failed communists and socialists around the world would love and eventually would cause us all to fail. I'd like to, before we go any farther, it's kind of funny. I want to tell you a little story, which is tough to do when I can't hear the audience laugh. So please laugh. I'll do the George or the Jeb Bush, please clap.
I'll make sure to start unmuting myself and laughing.
There, please, Annie, at the end of this little thing, if you would laugh, that'd be great. The Capitol behind me, right after the Capitol insurrection, which wasn't an insurrection, the January 6th 3-hour riot, I decided to be funny, and I took a little cutout that I made from a newspaper picture of the shaman, the crazy guy with the horn thing and all that. I cut him out real small, and I actually taped him up right there where Columbia, the statue, goes on top of the Capitol. And then I did this. I took a picture going, right? And I thought I was being funny. And I sent that to my friends. And we laughed about it. We said, ah. And disclaimer, I think the shaman is a mental case. I think that while the people at the Capitol that day had intentions of showing their true feelings, it got out of hand, it became a riot and became counterproductive. I also believe, and we'll talk more about this, that the reaction to that by the Biden administration has been a grotesque and horrifying abuse of state power. So I took the picture, we laughed, all is well. A couple days later, I was on Fox News talking about the insurrection. And I told them, no, it wasn't an insurrection, it was a riot. We went through all this. And then as I finished the hit, I did this. I had left it up. So I did a hit on Fox News about the insurrection with the shaman on top of the Capitol behind me. Now, the fortunate thing was the lights weren't perfect and it was really kind of tough to see. So you really couldn't tell unless you knew that he was up there. But if you went ahead, were dogged enough and went through my back channel of Fox News hits, there's literally one with that guy on there. And I assume now, probably in about half an hour, the FBI will be knocking on my door and taking me in for questioning. But let's get back to the actual topic and not the shaman. I called it the Second Civil War in start to be provocative. I wanted people to, be taken aback somewhat by it. I think it deserves that. And I think it's too easy to say we're in a culture war or we're doing this. And we have been. We've been talking like that for a couple decades while the left slowly boiled our frog and has been taking away the things that make America great. They've been taking over first academia. Then once they had the universities and colleges, they started training the next generation of teachers to teach our kids things that are fundamentally untrue, unhelpful, and indoctrinate them to acceptance of a more statist, a more socialist way of life. And we've seen the results of that. They took over our popular culture. Now you can't watch a television show without getting a woke fortune cookie in every segment, showing you why America is bad, systemic racism makes everything awful, and basically putting down any of the conservative or rightist or libertarian values that many of us on my side of the right hold dear. And then they also have taken over the permanent bureaucracy of government at all levels. And I think, again, that's something we call the deep state. There's a lot of ways to discuss it. But I think there was a fundamental split at some point between the right and left. And I date this in the book to the Cold War era. And essentially the establishment right, which at that time was a good thing, which it is not now, decided to focus more on national security, foreign policy, and business. And the establishment left, which was bad and is still bad, decided to focus on taking over those areas that I discussed. They took over academia, they took over education, they took over permanent government and popular culture, and obviously the media. And they've used all those since then very effectively over that several decade long period, from the late 50s through, I date the next significant change to the election of Barack Obama. But to finish out that concept, we on the right focused on business and family and faith and the things that we believed were protected enough by the Constitution that we didn't really have to concern ourselves with losing them. And the left focused on taking those things away from us. And they did it slowly, they did it effectively, they did it creatively. They used popular culture, they put it in TV shows, they put it in movies. And consequently, without noticing, or with a lot of us noticing and a lot not, they very effectively took over a large section of this country. And now we're seeing the results of that. So I think when Barack Obama was elected, we hit another crossroads. And he could have been the uniter. George W. Bush was never going to be the uniter. Obama could have been. He was the first Black president in a country that had a legacy that included slavery, that included institutional discrimination against Blacks. He could have been the guy who said, guess what? We made it. We're there. I am a Black man sitting in the most powerful seat on the planet, and I was democratically elected by the populace. I'd like to thank all of you who voted for me, and for those of you who didn't, I'd like to welcome you to a country we're going to unite together. He didn't do that. He's fundamentally incapable of doing that because Barack Obama is a woke socialist at his core. So what he did was he empowered the groups that now are driving all of us crazy. So Black Lives Matter was formed during Obama's time in office because of, it happened after the Ferguson shooting of a thug who was trying to beat up a cop. He did, and that whole hands up, don't shoot. Obama backed that play. And consequently, he gave fuel to the activist groups. He said, your grievances are real. You are oppressed. There is systemic racism, and it's holding all of you back. And the people who are doing that to you is me. and people who look like me. So he literally took Martin Luther King's concept of, judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, and flipped it on its head and took us back to where we segregated ourselves by identity groups. They did. I didn't. I don't have any interest in the color of people's skin. I have significant interest in the content of their character and the ideologies they follow. So I dislike what Obama did, not because he is a light-skinned Black man who speaks well, to quote his own party. I dislike him because he is a quasi-socialist leftist who empowered the groups that ended up burning this country down last year. So we went through the Obama years, and he did a lot to further that cause. When Professor Henry Louis Gates was arrested at his house for breaking into his own house, Obama famously said the police acted stupidly. Well, no, they didn't. They didn't know who he was. They knew he was an angry, belligerent man they came upon who was trying to break a window to get into his own house, to get into a house. So he did a lot of things, I think, that furthered the grievance mongering industry, as I sometimes call it, of the activist left. Their entire business model is built around the idea that you identify by identity politics. So by an inanimate quality like your race, your sex, or gender, or whatever that is today, your orientation as far as who you like, whatever. They pick one of those things. They identify a grievance for that group. For Blacks, it's systemic racism, homophobia, misogyny, whatever you want it to be. And then you go ahead and ask for a redress to that grievance using state power or using intimidation on corporations or whatever. And that's how they generate their power. They split us up, they pit us against each other, or they pit all of us, except me, against me and people who look like me. But in the end, it's a way to generate grievances, to distribute spoils, and that's their power base. Well, Obama did a great job of that. The problem was people started to notice. And I think before Obama, they had been doing a good job of keeping this kind of under the radar. They were doing it slowly. Like I said, they were boiling the frog. When Obama came out, they decided to barbecue the frog, and they threw him on the Barbie and they started turning the frog, and we're like, hey, ow, that kind of hurts. And people started to notice. And it had to get bad enough that people were willing to do something about it, because as I mentioned, those of us on the right, we were busy building families, building businesses, going to church, doing whatever kind of religious things we want to do. We had things that kept us occupied and made us happy. We were enjoying life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They didn't like that because they don't like the decisions that free people make. So it was a combination of doing their identity politics, grievance mongering, and then building the statist system behind that allowed them to tell people what to do, as opposed to allowing them to exercise their individual liberty and make decisions that the left dislikes. And they started pushing those things on us, and all of a sudden people are like, whoa, hold on there, big fella. And the reaction to Obama doing that, and all of us kind of collectively going, really? Was Donald Trump. All right. Trump was the reaction to that, because people got sick of the establishment Republican politicians not fighting back. And that was the one thing I heard from Trump supporters. I was a skeptic. I didn't think Trump could get elected because I thought they demonized him to the point where he couldn't be elected. Well, I was wrong, gladly wrong. But he was elected, and what he did then was he took the anger that a lot of us felt about being trampled underfoot by statists who wanted to control how we're operating, and who were calling us racists and all of those other things they were doing. And he said, no, we're not going to do that. And he fought back. And that was that was a blessing to all of us who'd been watching those rights be trampled and watching them go away, and being unable to do anything about it. So what that also did, though, was that made the left insanely angry. They become unhinged. Whereas before they'd kind of been steadily ratcheting up the statist control and the identity politics and the rest of that. Trump got in and they're like, they ripped the masks off and they said, no, this is horrible. And what you're doing is awful. And you can't say that. And you can't close the border and you can't do these things. And Trump was like, yes, I can. And we were like, yes, he can. And that made them mad. And what they did is they then showed their true colors. They were like, we do hate this country. We do hate America. It's a racist, misogynist, sexist, homophobic, ismist place. And it must be torn down and destroyed, and we will replace it with a socialist paradise. Well, anybody who's listening to this, except for the infiltrators and the NSA, understands there is no such thing as a socialist paradise. There are nice places that get turned into dumps when you apply socialist tactics. But they didn't care. They were so unhinged and angry at that point that they were attacking Trump. He made them so mad that they lost their ability to be measured in how they were doing this. And consequently, they showed America what they actually wanted. And we went even more like, whoa. I mean, that's horrible. And we're seeing it now. You know, now that we have progressed past Trump, let's leave the 2020 election and that mess out of this for a second. But now that we're seeing what's happened post-Trump, what are they doing? They're applying state control of individual liberties because they don't want us making decisions they don't like. We're killing the planet, you know, we're hurting people's feelings. We're doing all these things that individuals with liberty are allowed to do, and they don't want that. So the Biden administration is, and well, the Biden administration, meaning everybody but Sleepy Joe, who's not really in charge of anything, is ratcheting up at a massive level. So now they're like, vaccine mandate, that's a good idea. You know, they're doing things that normal people would never have considered our government capable of doing, but they don't see any reason not to. You know, they're not being stopped in a meaningful way. So that's where I think we find ourselves today. We are at loggerheads. We're a country of two ideologies. The right is the founding principles and individual liberty. The left, I guess I'm doing that wrong for the screen, but whatever, it's my left, is abhorrent to individual liberty, and they want state control. We're not going to reconcile those two things. The only way we can preserve the way of life we want is to slow the left down, stop them, fight them to a standstill, fight them to the point where they feel enough pain that they sue for peace. And I mean this figuratively. The title of the book is Winning the Second Civil War Without Firing a Shot. I think we can still do all of the things I want to do without getting into armed conflict. As a matter of fact, I think violence is counterproductive for our side. We can't, the left can burn the country down, you know, through all of 2020, cause $2 billion of damage, injure 1,000 cops, attack hundreds of federal buildings, and nobody cares, apparently. We have a 3-hour riot, and all of a sudden it is, you know, the worst thing since 9/11. All right, so it's not a fair playing field, but we have enough of our constitutional protections. We have some sort of majority at the Supreme Court. We're going to crush them in the midterms in 2022. And if we're smart and we fight hard within the rules, I think we can make the left feel the pain they need to, that we can come to some sort of a similar arrangement that we had with the Soviets during the Cold War and have a détente. You know, yes, we hate you, you hate us. We're never going to agree on anything, but we're going to stop trying to destroy each other and just live our lives in our federal republic, which lets you live where you want in states that may act the way you want. So I'm going to go ahead and say at that point, I've laid enough groundwork, I think, that we can start discussing this a little more and, you know, let some other opinions come in and bat around some ideas, because I don't think I have all of the clues. There's some things in the book about how to win. Don't get that wrong. But I also think that this is a constructive team thing, and our side is full of very smart, very motivated people. And I am very open to additional ideas and questions about how we can do this. So with that being my monologue, I'll throw it back to you, Annie, and we can Q&A and kind of scheme for a bit together.
Sounds like a good idea. And thank you for those points for our audience, just in case if you missed it. We both mentioned it, but you can get Jim's book. Just look up Winning the Second Civil War Without Firing a Shot by Jim Henson. I'm going to come up with the first question for you, Jim. So you have served, and thank you for that. But you've seen things a lot of average Americans probably have never seen, maybe in movies, a little bit sugar-coated. Another thing that makes someone like me very concerned is outside of the Civil War, which you're very correct about, it's the fact that we are under attack by Islamists that have gained momentum since Obama administration as well, when we actually had Muslim Brotherhood sitting in our White House giving advice to Obama administration. How do we go about that? Like, how do we fight an enemy that is not afraid to blow up buildings and turn our airplanes into weapons? How do we fight them without firing a single shot?
That may be the exception, and I am perfectly willing to fire some shots at any of the Brotherhood and the many terrorist groups that they support worldwide. I think, unfortunately, Joe Biden and the morons in the clown car that constitutes his foreign policy team have made attacks on the United States much more likely by the craven way they capitulated to the Taliban and ran away in Afghanistan. I think people sometimes fetishize Afghanistan too much, as if that's the only place people can plot terrorist attacks on earth. You're well aware that there are plenty of places like Tehran and other places where a lot of that dirty work gets done. But we're going to have to face the fact that for some reason, and this is the other thing that really I've never been able to wrap my head around, why does the left ally itself with the Islamists? You know, and they've been doing it for decades. They've always taken the side of a group that shares no values at all with what the liberal, progressive left claims they believe. They hate women, they hate gays, they hate everything about a free society that the left, ostensibly claims they want. But I think the one thing that the left shares with the Islamists is a belief in control. That's one thing. Is Islam, the way it is used by groups in like the mullahs in Tehran, the Taliban, Al Qaeda, and anybody like that, the Brotherhood, all those groups, they use it to control the population. Sharia law is designed. It is a 100% control-based submission, being the definition of Islam, is a way to control the population. The left likes that. All right. They hate religion, but they like control. They like the fact that the Islamists can do that. So I think there's a greater danger now, because that blinds them to the fact that the first people who are going to be hanging from cranes if the Islamists ever get a foothold in the United States will be most of the progressive left. And I think that's something, though, that we on the right are going to have to be the ones to deal with, because they won't. They have shown consistently that they misunderstand the threat. They try to coddle the mullahs in Iran. They send them plane loads of cash. The deal with the Taliban in Afghanistan involved a couple plane loads of money going from Qatar, who is a major sponsor of global terrorism, to Afghanistan, to the Taliban. And the plane that flew the Taliban leader back on it had all kinds of goodies for them on that. So I think that's a big problem that I think falls on the more kinetic side of things, and the broader global culture war, once we get back to an administration that actually can understand that threat as opposed to allying themselves with that threat.
Very true. But then I guess the second problem that I see is, how do we get back to an administration that can see the problem, where the number of elected Muslims are growing dramatically every election? And I personally know that Quran 45:37 says, do not call for peace when you are superior in numbers. So as soon as 1/3 of the government are Sharia practicing Muslims, there is no going back from there. And again, how do we fight? Now I know how to fight that, but I'm not allowed to say how to fight that because I'm just biased, fear-mongering Islamophobe. But in your point of view, how do we fight the normalization of electing or selecting Sharia practicing Muslim candidates who are not going to uphold our constitution when it comes to picking between Sharia, Quran, Muhammad, and the constitution?
Yeah, I think you've hit on something that crosses that encapsulates that problem, but also encapsulates what I think is the larger problem, which is statism and control-based things that are what the left is going for. So I think let's combine those two into one solution. I'm not separating them because I don't think they're far from congruent. All right, they're different flavors of totalitarianism. The left, the wokeness as an ideology is a totalitarian statist, authoritarian belief system. So is Sharia compliant Islam. But if you want to defeat that in the United States, that comes on the team on the right that says, no, we founded this country based on individual liberty. It's founded on the idea that no government is supreme to a citizen, that the citizen is supreme, that the individual liberties that we enjoy are unable to be surpassed. And I think that you have to base that on the Constitution and just go back to the idea that some of the implementations for both wokeness and for any of the extreme Islamist views are designed to take away constitutional freedoms and allow a level of control that is not contemplated and is actually the entire Constitution was written to avoid that type of control. It was written to ensure that that can't happen. Now we've been slacking. We've been slipping, and that's part of the theme of my book, is we haven't been cognizant of the threats, or we have diminished them in our minds in a way that is unfair. So things like that are happening. And I think the way to beat it, though, is just sheer, because the Constitution can't just be erased. Had Hillary Clinton beaten Donald Trump and she had appointed the 3 Supreme Court justices that Trump did, I think they would have taken whiteout to the Constitution, and we'd be living in a republic that no longer bears any resemblance to what the founders gave us. Fortunately, we dodged a bullet there. Trump put 3 justices in who I'm not always happy with, but who I infinitely prefer to the ones Hillary would have put in. So we've still got those constitutional protections. And I think we who believe in individual liberty and do not believe in any totalitarian control at all, any authoritarian system, any state system, religious, secular, whatever, telling us how to live our lives, we have to organize. We have to do a better job of electing candidates who will fight for that. And we have to oppose those on the other side by exposing them as statists who believe in that level of control. And I think that works equally well as a solution for the Islamist side as it does for the woke side, because they may not, the woke left claims that they are not a religion, but they are a religion. They are a secular religion, and they have dogma, and they have heresies, and they declare people apostate, and they shun. They do all the things that an extremist religion does. They just call it an ideology. And I think it works better if you go ahead and consider them to be an extremist religion bent on control based on their dogma. I think you will completely grasp the menace that we face. And I think that menace runs in parallel to the one you mentioned.
Amen. We the people have the best constitution we could ever ask for. I can talk to you for another 5 hours, but as promised, I'm going to start reading some of the questions. And yes, I gave in our lovely audience. I will wear my glasses from now on. First question comes from Stephen. The key is the media. How can we win when the media is so corrupt and will never stop trying to indoctrinate the people?
Oh, right there, I think that encapsulates our biggest challenge. All right, that is the one, because knowledge is power, and they have taken over the information space. We no longer have free speech. All right, now it's not the government that is effectively, putting their thumb on the scale and saying, you won't do that. You can't do that. What they've done is they've subcontracted that out to their friends and allies in Silicon Valley and the media. For a long time, the liberal media has been a talking point that has been accurate for 20 years. I can't remember, probably the Vietnam War, when Cronkite came out against the Vietnam War, was the last time they had their masks on and were pretending to be unbiased. So right now there is, a massive information deficit on our side. They can get their talking points out, their narrative out in a way that we cannot match. So we have to do it through guerrilla means. We have to organize. It's one thing to say, okay, well, we need to start our own media companies and do that. And there are some, if you look, it was at one point just Fox News, but now you have OAN, now you have Newsmax, now you have other places, you can watch the Glazov Gang and other places, things like the Freedom Center does to work to get the message out. But you still have to watch out, because Facebook Live, where this is streaming, Zuckerberg's censors are watching right now, and they're trying to decide whether they should shut us down because of something I said or something Annie said. And they'll do it in a heartbeat. They'll do it in a second. And what's horrifying is now the Biden administration has admitted that they are colluding with the tech companies to decide what people should and shouldn't say. Jen Psaki, the freckle-faced fascist, went ahead from the podium of the White House in the communications room and said, we tell Facebook what posts we don't like and they take them down. I can't think of a more horrifying concept, because that's a way for them to try and get around the First Amendment. All right. The government can't say, take that down, but the government can tell Facebook to, and Facebook can go, sure, we'd love to do that. Now that's actually unconstitutional. There is a Supreme Court ruling that says the government can't outsource anything that it would be prohibited from doing by the Constitution, but they're doing it. So we have to sue them. And I think there are a bunch of ways where we can start to break the monopoly of both the media and social media that are going to require states to empower their attorneys general, states to pass laws that say you can't take away someone's social media account because you dislike what they say, if it's not incitement to violence. That people have a property right to the social media accounts that they create. And I think those laws are in the process. Florida did some good stuff. Governor DeSantis, Abbott's doing some stuff in Texas, and then we have to sue them. Let's sick lawyers on them and make them defend that, and make it no longer a free chance for them to simply censor and push us off the information stage and do that. This is not going to be an easy fight. This is the long war. The long war is fighting that information war until we have enough of a voice, because the reason they have to shut us up is our ideas are better. All right. They can't compete in a fair fight between the liberty-based ideas that I hold dear and the statist, absolutist control that they want through their side. So if that ever happens, they lose. So we have to fight until we can get enough of our ideas bubbling up through whatever means that theirs are at least exposed. And it's happening. There is a groundswell of fighting back against, say, CRT, the racist training that they're doing in corporations and schools. That's going organically. It's bubbling sideways and doing that. And I think as those things happen, we'll find more and more ways to communicate. But that's going to be a long fight until our media and message and narrative machine is anywhere near as loud as theirs.
Agreed. And that's the thing. When we wait so long to start fighting back, the fight just becomes harder because they have built momentum that we have to stop. So, if anyone would think this is an easy fight, I would say they need to get a little bit more educated on the topic. Here's the next question from Mix. I hear some say that Trump talking about things like the stolen election just drives middle voters away. Don't we have to accept that we need to not upset that large group of suing voters by toning down our message, or is that self-defeating?
That's a tough line to walk. Personally, I think that there were a lot of flaws in the 2020 election, and I think if the same rules that were used for the 2018 election had been used in the 2020 election, that Trump would have won. All right, not because I don't do the voting machine stuff or anything like that. I think it was based around the idea of a mass of mail-in and absentee ballots that were sent out with zero controls over them, and then those came back without the usual ability to check them that we needed. You know, they were the acceptance rates for mail-in and absentee ballots in 2020 was so much higher than it was in 2018, 2016, and before, that it's an anomaly. So I think there is a legitimate beef there. I think Trump takes it too far because it's personal. And I'll be honest, I don't blame him. If I thought an election had been stolen from me, I would be fighting, you know, every second of every day to make the world know that. But I think we can't, all of us, go ahead and share his personal pain. We have to decide, what is it we want? And what we want is to not let them cheat in any coming elections. And that requires us to speak in ways, as the question was phrased, that don't alienate the voters that went the other way. You know, this was not an election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It was an election between Donald Trump and people who don't like Donald Trump. All right. And there was a considerable vote for Donald Trump. It was huge. There was also a very considerable vote for not Donald Trump. And I think there was a chunk of that was people who belong with us. You know, they just don't like Trump personally. And at some level, I understand that. You know, he's tough to love. He does a lot of things that drive me crazy too. He also did a lot of things that I think saved the republic. So I think when we look at what our actual goal is going forward, I want to win back both houses of Congress in 2022. And then I want to use those houses of Congress to make the left suffer every second of every day the way they do when they're in power. They impeached Trump twice for garbage. We should impeach Joe Biden for the corruption he and Hunter did before he was in office and all of the things he's done since. Paybacks and medevac. You know, you've got to use the power you have. So I think when we look at how we're going to frame the counterattack, figuratively, I think it starts by saying we are not going to go full scorched earth. This was a 2020 election issue, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the future of the country, making sure elections are fair in you know, the 2022, 2024 and forward, and talking about that in a way that draws people to our team, because the Democrats have given us so much ammo to fight with them. COVID and the economy and the border and Afghanistan. They've done nothing right. They've done nothing that wasn't a complete debacle. So we have all the issues going our direction. The public is going our way. We just need to make sure we don't alienate people by making this a rehash of 2022 or 2020 and Trump, as opposed to a new election in 2022 to push the people out who are making all of our lives miserable.
Agreed. And if you don't mind me adding this, I don't know, when did we start? I still don't do that. When I go to vote for someone, I vote based on their policy. I don't vote on, I mean, would I go grab a drink with them? Most likely not. Could I talk more than 2 seconds with them? No. But that doesn't mean they're not a good candidate for the job. It's kind of that we, the people, we are hiring these people. We don't have to like them on a personal level or love them or even agree with their personal choices, as long as they keeping their personal choices outside of their job. Isn't that how it works?
I think that's exactly it, Annie. You know, I mean, you don't have to like Trump, but like I said, I give him credit for saving the republic, because no one else could have beat Hillary. All right, none of the other Republican candidates, that weak soup of rhino garbage that was on stage with him, not a one of them could have beat Hillary one-on-one. And therefore, we got those 3 Supreme Court justices and 250 federal judges. That matters. All right, so Trump did that. God bless it. Thank you for doing that. And if he ends up being the candidate in 2024, I'll vote for him. I will vote for whoever the candidate is in 2024 for the Republican Party, because even more than I vote for someone and for someone's policies, I can wholeheartedly vote against the policies of the Democrats right now, because their wokeness mob is running that party and they want to tear down all of our constitutional controls and turn this place into something I don't want to live in. So I will vote against Democrats and then for people who will enact policies I like. And right now, that's 100% Republican.
Agreed. And I also want to say, fellow Americans, please stop thinking Trump is the only op. Now, don't get me wrong. I have voted for President Trump both times. I appreciate a lot of things he did for us. However, as a nation, we cannot rely on one person to be our savior. And let's not mention, as Christians, we shouldn't do that either. But as Jim said, whomever is running on the Republican side of things, get behind them. They may not be President Trump, but they're better than Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
Amen to that. And I think that's smart, because we're not a cult of personality. Trump was an amazing human being, still is. He what he did is unprecedented. But if Ron DeSantis runs, I think he'd win against any candidate. If Greg Abbott runs, I think he'd beat any Democrat candidate. I think right now, with the path the Democrats have chosen and what they're doing, we can run anyone and beat them. So let's do that. Let's win in 2022. Let's start the momentum. Let's make them feel the pain with hearings in that building back there on all the malfeasance they're doing. And let's plan for 2024, taking back the White House and both houses of Congress, and then ripping out by the roots all of the woke idiocy they've put into the military, they've put into our government, and all the places where they've overstepped constitutionally. Let's empty some executive office buildings here. I live, across the river from DC. Let's empty them. They've got people there who do not share the belief that the Constitution should be supreme and therefore should not be in any type of leadership role. The FBI, the DOJ. There are people there who need to lose their jobs. And I hope whoever our next chief executive is takes their position as you're fired from Trump's apprentice days and uses that power.
Exactly. Okay, let's switch gears on questions here. This one is from Bernardo. I'm an immigrant Cuban American. My parents instilled profound gratitude and reverence to this nation, my adopted homeland. But I sense a cultural sea change in immigrants of what I perceive a lesser gratitude. Will the left succeed in diluting citizenship and its inherent obligations and duties? I second that question.
Yeah, that's a great concept right there. First of all, I love Cuban immigrants because they actually understand the danger we're talking about. There's a guy named Robbie Starbuck, who is a Cuban himself. His family got out, and he was a producer in Hollywood. He made rap videos, he made trailers for the big movie houses, and he was living the life. He was one of those guys who was living the high life in Hollywood, and he hated what he saw. He was disgusted for his kids by what they were seeing as far as morality and everything else. And he packed up and moved to a suburb of Nashville. He took his family, he said, I want to live with people who share my values, the values that he learned from his family and their Cuban roots. And he's now running for Congress in that Nashville suburb. And he, I think, is going to win. So that's a name to keep in mind. Robbie Starbuck is a great guy. I think I've always seen in the past 10 to 20 years that there is such a great flavor of patriotism among naturalized citizens in America because they didn't get it at birth. I was born in this country. My grandmother emigrated to this country, right? So I'm a second generation American, but I was born here. So for me, all of this was, I never knew anything different. But people who did truly grasp the tremendous gift that I and everyone else who was a born in the United States citizen gets. And I think that I feel the danger that the questioner had about, are we now importing people who see America as, instead of the shining city on a hill, the place where liberty and freedom will reign true, but as a piggy bank to be raided, as a place where you go to basically get free stuff, which is the left's entire business model. Their model is free ice cream And the problem for us on the right is our business model has always been selling broccoli. We tell the hard truths. We say, no, there is no free lunch. And the left's like, yeah, there is. It's right over here. The problem is there is no free lunch. And all they're doing is redistributing wealth from productive people to non-productive people. So I think if we now have an immigrant class that instead of leaving oppression for the opportunity that America presents to build your own, wealth and create prosperity and security for your family, and instead are bringing people who believe that they deserve those things, and that they should be gifted those things as opposed to having to work tremendously hard hours to get them, I think that's a problem. And I think that falls again into not allowing the left to dictate who our immigrant class is. I'm a huge fan of immigration. Like I said, second generation American, but I think we can do a merit-based immigration system. I think we can decide as a country, this is who we want to come here. We want people with skills. We want a certain number of refugees because we're kind-hearted people and we want to help where we can, but we can't take the whole world in. And we certainly don't want to take in people who have an expectation that they're going to be baby possums riding on the mama possum of America and getting a free ride. Everybody in America should earn their own way. And if that's not what you believe, I don't think you're the kind of immigrant that we want to be inviting to this country.
Agreed. And I've been saying this for a while now as an immigrant myself. When I came to America, even when the idea of America started developing in my head, having no knowledge of it, I wasn't thinking of, the free stuff. I was thinking of building a life in America equals becoming an American. So I don't understand why the new generation, because I came here about more than 19 years ago. Back then, I was the second group after September 11th to come in. So we had to go through serious screening before coming in, which I loved it back then because it made me feel safer. Let's not fast forward to today and how I feel about that. But point is, the new generation, they come in, as you said, with expectation that is like, wait a minute, are you here as a guest or are you here to become one of us? Because someone who's going to become an American should look forward to learning the language, the culture, the ups and downs, the Constitution, laws, get a job, buy a house, that's becoming one of us. But the mentality, as you said, or the mentality is Ilhan Omar. I become one of you with a complete distinct hate for you. And then I work inward to try to destroy you.
Yeah, she is a reprehensible example of how saving someone from a horrific situation and bringing them to the promised land can go wrong. And I think, and that's one of the things, but the left has marketed America now and the idea of immigration as a handout, not as a shovel you're being handed so you can dig yourself, a ditch to earn a way for your kids to go to a better school, and do those kind of things. I think the mentality, and it's been lost on Americans as well, they want a mentality among the citizenry that you deserve a certain standard of living, whether you earned it or not. And if you didn't get that, it's not your fault. It was systemic racism. It was some other ism that held you back, not the fact that you didn't work as hard, you didn't do the things necessary, you didn't sacrifice in ways that most others have. It's pretty easy for people to say, oh, shut up, you've got white privilege. You grew up in a way that other people can't. Well, let's look at it. Okay. My dad grew up in a town of 350 people in Nebraska. He didn't even learn enough in high school because they didn't have the classes that when he was going to be appointed to West Point to go to the military academy, he hadn't even had algebra. So he had to go to 2 years of military prep school before he could go to West Point for 4 years, before he could go to war for 2 tours in Vietnam, before he could come home and then earn for his family. All right. All of that was 100% bootstrap and earned with blood and sweat. When I turned 18, I didn't go out and take the giant bag of cash that he handed me and never work a day in my life. I joined the Army at 18. I went ahead and served my time and learned some trades and learned some things. And since then, have never taken a dime that wasn't earned by my sweat or whatever. And, earned my way now to a prosperous, safe, secure lifestyle. And I think that mentality now is not what the woke left believes. And that's something that really has to start in the schools. That's where our education system has to be revamped to teach people that, no, you don't have a handout coming. What you have is a hand handing you an opportunity to work to create your own prosperity.
Yeah, and let's just quickly do a history lesson. Afghanistan used to have a kingdom. Actually, they had a beautiful queen who was very well educated, had a degree from United Kingdom. But then because people got on their impression that free stuff is cool, they lost their kingdom, their free country to Islam, and then they became what it is today. And then when Joe Biden's administration was running away from Afghanistan and Taliban, they held on to planes to get to America so they could come here, be housed in our military base in Wisconsin, and then be indicted and charged with raping and sexually assaulting children and strangling wives. You following me here?
Yeah, that's horrifying. And I think that's a perfect example of the difference between an immigration policy that rewards people who are going to become productive citizens in this country and who understand that concept, and a kind of soft-hearted liberalist view that says, oh, but we have so much and they have so little that we should just randomly, pick a certain number of people, as many as we can fit in planes, and fly them here, and then use that to make our guilty consciences feel less. Well, I'm sorry, I have been to so many places that are filled with suffering people. And I have immunized children, I've built schools, I've dug wells. We've done so much in a dozen or more countries that I could name, that I don't feel guilty about what I have. I want America to be an example to those people of if you empower freedom and liberty and you live the way we show you can live, you can build that in your own country. And if you share our values, a certain number of you can have the chance to come here and join us in an already working example of that. That's a sane immigration policy.
Amen. Agreed. Okay, we are almost out of time. Let me squeeze one more question in there. This question is asked by Michael. One of our biggest obstacle is clearly the near unilateral, sorry for mispronouncing that, support for the leftist agenda in the popular culture. What can we do to level that playing field and reach the middle?
Great question. One of the chapters in my book, which Winning the Second Civil War Without Firing a Shot is worth a read, is about making our culture popular. All right, we lost the culture war to the left. They took it over. And I think one of the things that we need to remember, as Andrew Breitbart said, popular culture is upstream of politics. So he said politics is downstream from culture. And essentially what he's saying is the things we consume as popular culture form our worldview for almost all people, because they're just not, most people are not taking the time to dig into news stories. They're not taking the time to learn from source material themselves. They're absorbing the marketing from the left, which, since they took over our popular culture, as the questioner says, and I firmly agree, they've used to insinuate leftist ideas into every aspect of all of our media culture and the rest of it. We have to go ahead and fight back. There have been some instances of this. Dinesh D'Souza has been making movies recently. He made one called Infidel. It was about a prison break from a prison in the Middle East where a Christian pastor was thing. And it wasn't just a decent movie for a conservative. It was a good movie. It was a good action movie. All right. I watched it and I've got a pretty high bar for films like that. I'm not just going to go ahead and say, well, it's good enough because it was made by conservatives. It was a good movie. Ben Shapiro did the same thing. They made a movie about a school shooter. I believe it was Run, Hide, Fight or something along those lines. That was about, a bunch of nihilist students taking over a school, starting to kill people. and the daughter of a veteran who'd been trained by him in tactics and shooting and things like that, fighting back against them. And that was not only a good movie, that was an edge of the seat good movie. My wife, who's a retired paratrooper, and I watched that movie, like, wow, we spent the whole movie like that. We need to do more of that. And we need to patronize those who are doing it for us. Anytime you see something like that, join in. But we need to make a concerted effort to make not just, there's been a lot of Christian programming, and good. I am 100% in favor of things like that, but it can't be that purely overtly Christian type of programming. It has to be popular culture. It has to have bad stuff in it. It has to have people cussing and shooting and doing things like that if we're going to compete against the left. So we have to kind of bite the bullet and shoot the bullet figuratively in those types of cultural, milieus in a way that allows our side to market our ideas. And then what we do is we insinuate conservative ideas into that, not as the main theme, but as a side theme, which is how the left did it. We get back to that marketing of ideas and we compete with them in that. Again, we're way behind. They have a massive advantage, but if we don't start and we don't continue and we don't push, we'll never win. So that's the way you beat that.
100% agreed. And I'm going to do what I always do. I think it annoys people. Hey, I didn't make it to America until I was 18. I was 18 years too late, but guess what? I played catch up, and 19 years later, I'm there. You might be late to the party, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy the party. That's just my life story. On that note, Jim, thank you so much for your words of wisdom, for sharing your information with us. And again, thank you so much for your service to our country. And for me personally, if it wasn't for people like you, I wouldn't have a second chance of life in a beautiful country called America. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad you're here because it's people like you who improve the quality and who remind everyone who was given this gift without having to fight for it and earn it, just how valuable it is. So thank you for valuing that and joining the team.
My pleasure. I will be on your side until we win.
There you go. And win we will. We will win the second Civil War without firing a shot. My publisher requires me to say that. And I hope you read it. If you have questions, I'm pretty easy to find on social media. Yank my chain and we'll, if anyone in the audience wants to play, we'll play in public. Perfect.
Do tell our audience what are your social media handles, and also if you have a website they can go to.
Sure thing. I am Jim Hansen DC on Twitter, which is the main place that I run my mouth. I like Twitter because it's where the left hangs out. And so we can give them a hard time. So that's the easiest place to find me. And then I point to other things. AmericaMatters.com has the website where my book, I had a previous book called The Myth of White Fragility talking about critical race theory too. So I think this is an ongoing thing. I left foreign policy and national security because this is where the fight is. And I hope everyone watching tonight does whatever you can to get in the battle as well.
AmericaMatters.com. Thank you so much, Jim. And to our lovely audience who has stayed with us until now, we appreciate you as well. And please remember to go to frontpagemag.com and consider making 100% tax-deductible donations so we can keep on doing what we're doing. With that being said, please just stay safe and goodbye.